Hi, and welcome to the final panel of AngelList Confidential this year. The last 3 days have been incredible, and this last panel will be a founder panel focused on AI and machine learning. I'm Sharon. I'm joined by Harrison Chase and Guillermo Rauch. And we'll chat about AI and machine learning from past to the present to the future. And we'll end with some Q&A for the last 5 to 10 minutes. So feel free to use the chat function of Hopin to ask your questions. So starting with some formal introductions, I'm Sharon. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Lamini. We're building the LLM enterprise platform for proprietary LLMs. And before this, I was computer science faculty at Stanford, teaching generative AI and leading a research group there. I did my PhD under Andrew Ng at Stanford in generative AI as well, and teach about 250,000 students and professionals in, you guessed it, generative AI. So I've been in this space for about the past decade. Harrison, I've known you for over the past year. Things have progressed so far. I remember when we first chatted about LLMs, you were like, what are LLMs? But that was way before ChatGPT and everything. And things have come a huge way, 180-degree flip with Linkchain. So tell us a bit more about what you're doing now and what you're excited about. Just tell us who you are, Harrison.
Yeah, absolutely. Really excited to be here, and thanks for having me. My name is Harrison, CEO and co-founder of Linkchain. We build developer tooling to help developers build LLM applications. So we've got an open source framework, and then we've got some logging, debugging, monitoring tools as part of a SaaS platform. My background's in more traditional ML and ML ops. So I worked at Kensho, a fintech startup in the Boston area where we have some mutual friends there, doing some time series and NLP things there. And then I worked at Robust Intelligence, ML ops startup doing testing and validation of machine learning models, mostly traditional ML models, but that's very relevant for LLMs where they're so unpredictable and can kind of go off the rails very easily.
Nonsense. No, I'm kidding. And now throwing it to you, Guillermo.
Hey, I'm Guillermo Rauch, and I'm the founder and CEO of Versel. Versel is a developer tools company as well. We create what we call the front-end cloud, which is the fastest way to deploy an application to the cloud today. And these applications are highly dynamic. So we built this framework, Next.js, also open source, that powers the interface side of a lot of popular applications, including ChatGPT, Claude. A lot of the AI revolution is happening through a web browser, so Versel is helping developers create these awesome experiences. My background is in open source and creating tools that give great developer experience to engineers, and so happy to be a part of this wave of enabling folks to now create AI products, which we'll get into the conversation.
And this is a very special moment in AI. I've been working in this space for about a decade, and this is just such a special paradigm shift in how people are not only leveraging AI, but using it for all these different creative use cases. Guillermo, given what you've seen before in business, you've been in software for a very long time. Contextualize this moment a little bit. What makes it so special?
Yeah, something that for me I keep coming back to is really exciting right now is AI has almost like reconfigured the board.
Yeah.
For businesses of all sizes. Of course, for startups, we're now seeing that startups are really excited about creating AI infrastructure. There's a chatbot coming out. There's the meme of the ChatGPT wrapper, right? So for young companies, the opportunity to leverage these tremendous breakthroughs in research in AI that's been now turned into services that it can be called over the network. So not having to do all that heavy lifting of figuring out how to train a model from scratch. So you can kind of go from idea to application in minutes, leveraging all of this AI innovation. So it's a really exciting time for startups. It's a really exciting time for incumbents. A lot has been discussed around, well, if I already have a platform with lots of users and lots of data and lots of engagement, I can now leverage AI to basically create even a deeper moat, new kinds of products that are only unique to some incumbents. So I think compared to other trends that I've seen in the past, this one seems a lot faster. It's highly competitive. Of course, we're in the open source world. We're enabling developers to create these tools and applications really easily, but the rate at which we're seeing applications get created on the Versel platform alone to the tune of an 800% increase in AI applications since the beginning of the year, the pace of it is fantastic. It seems like every week you have to re-examine your priors.
Yeah.
Okay, what could the AI do? You have to re-evaluate it every week.
Yeah.
And every week there's a new product opportunity that emerges from the rapid competition and availability of these services. And last but not least, I'll call out the utility. I think for a company like Versel that is so focused on user experiences, what I've been noticing is that this idea of leveraging natural language processing as the primary way that you interact with a product, it's now becoming mainstream. Of course, there's ChatGPT, but folks are introducing their own ChatGPT-like experiences into all kinds of products. And this is just a function of higher reliability, higher predictability, higher performance. AIs do have issues that we need to account for, but they're making it into the mainstream. And I think this is creating new categories of products and new ideas that we haven't really seen before. And yeah, we're excited to be powering those.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is that things are moving unprecedentedly fast. Maybe one little anecdote I'll share is I was once giving a talk, and it was a 30-minute talk. And at the end for Q&A, someone asked a question, well, what do you think of that model that came out 10 minutes ago? I was literally
Facts.
talking to
It's
you.
real.
I'm not like a generated
Yeah.
thing. And so yeah, that'll be my expectation level for Q&A.
I had a developer reach out to me the other day. So OpenAI put out new APIs,
Right.
and then he said, oh yeah, in 24 hours I created this new application, and the marketing material was ready. He has this awesome video showing it off. He built it on Versel, so of course I'm biased, but it was just incredible. 24 hours from release of a new API to getting an application online that hundreds of thousands of people can use. It's just unprecedented.
Yeah. Harrison, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think a lot of my takes are a bit more how it compares to kind of like the old way of doing ML. And I think you made a really good point around it being an API. And I think that's the big difference here and the big enabler. You don't have to set up the infrastructure. You don't have to train your model. You don't have to have the data. You can just use an API, and it's really enabling for a lot of developers to get started. I also think that poses some interesting kind of like questions as you move towards production as well.
Yeah.
Because I think what we're seeing is a lot of times it's so easy to get started building an application. Then you get that application, you get it out there, but you don't have any way to test it. You don't really know what it's good at. There's a whole nother conversation around kind of like moats and defensibility of a lot of these ideas, but I think that's a little bit separate. I think my take's more on like the ML side of things. These idea of like evaluation data sets. One, like people don't have data sets. Also, the metrics kind of are not good for a lot of these applications that people are building because they're not machine learning applications anymore. They're just like normal applications that are powered by AI. And so how do you evaluate a normal application? It's really difficult. And so I think, we're spending a lot of time thinking about what it means to go from like prototype to production and what challenges are along the way. And yeah, I think it's incredible how fast people are able to build things. I am like a little bit surprised at how few things I would say are actually in production though.
Yes.
I think, and then, I think, you've got ChatGPT, you've got Character. I mean, both of those, they own the full stack of models.
Correct.
And so I think it'll be interesting to see how that trend kind of like develops.
Right. But it's only been a year.
It's only been a year, yeah.
I think it connects to your insight around, it seems like that last 5%, it's easy to start.
Yes.
It's actually pretty easy to scale. What we've seen is that the models, the ones that are served as APIs, they can deal with a lot of throughput, but there's still some reliability issues. We've seen some downtime and things like that.
Some.
Yeah, compared to the old cloud,
We're all
right?
about 1.9 now.
Yeah, exactly. Like for AI, we'll give them a pass. Like we're at 98, right?
And I think that's actually a really important thing, though, because I think a lot of what people are struggling to think about is like what the right UX for these applications
Correct.
is.
Given the lack of reliability.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
This
And other things like latency, I'd say as well,
Right.
for longer running
Yeah.
things. Like I think there's some really interesting thoughts and thinking to be done.
At Versel, we build streaming technology for rendering any kind of web application. Our focus was on e-commerce, for example. So when you go to Amazon.com, they don't compute it all at once. they compute it and stream it to your screen. Sometimes you don't even notice because they prioritize the top part of the screen. And our impetus at Versel was, let's democratize this streaming technology for everybody so they can build fast websites. Turns out, streaming is really important in AI because you're calling out to this API that has to think, and then it has to stream their thoughts back to the user. And I think, to your point, this is a new kind of product and UX challenge that folks were not really intimately familiar with. The big giants, they were all leveraging this streaming technology. When you go to Google search, very similar thing. But the everyday application didn't have to think so much about the CRUD application, the SaaS dashboard. Now you're facing some unique and new and exciting, I think, UX challenges and opportunities.
Yeah, and to take it down to the hardware level, I mean, what we're seeing is, of course it's going to be slower. You know how many computations these models make on GPUs versus like hitting a website, which is on CPU, right? So it's a completely different paradigm of, yes, it's the same UX as an API, but it operates very differently from other
There's
APIs.
also, obviously with Linkchain, you're making this a lot easier. The intersection between the two compounds the problems. Because you have the LLM streaming output, but now you have to bring in some let's call it like software 1.0 system. You have to go to the over the network back to some database, some retrieval system, and then perhaps back.
Right.
And again, these are challenges that are pretty significant, even for the older kind of applications, like when you're wiring things together, distributed systems, retrying. Meanwhile, the user's waiting on the other side.
Right.
I had an experience today with I entered a query into ChatGPT, and it then delegated the web browsing system.
Yes.
And I was like, okay, I'm waiting. The
I
web
know,
browsing,
I
like
see it,
cool,
dot, dot, dot.
animation. Like, I don't think that's the end all be all. Like, I think we're still exploring the latent space. We're still exploring the UX and the reliability of the systems, like we talked about, and the speed. I think the speed is really important.
Of course, yeah. And different models can provide different speed improvements.
Correct.
And obviously, every player in the space is trying to improve that latency because it is, if we want to make multiple model calls, which we often do, to build real applications, we have to be able to improve that.
I do think I agree with that, but I'd throw out an alternative as well, which is kind of like focusing or shifting the UX away from things where you expect an instantaneous response and more towards applications where where you don't necessarily care about that. So like an example is, rather than a chatbot where you expect kind of like an instantaneous response. With email, you don't. Like email, I could send you an email and you might not respond for a day, and that would be totally normal. And so I think if you can't, and obviously the challenge here is figuring out like what are those workloads where you'd really trust like enough of it for it could be running like unsupervised, but still, I mean, this gets back to the reliability aspect. Like what are those workloads where you can trust enough?
Yeah, I have an example. Thanks for sharing that insight, because one of our customers, Lexica.art, they created this incredible search engine for generative art and images. And what they discovered is that they could do it offline. So they can generate lots of images and then help you navigate the space and then find similar images. The experience is incredible. You open it, everything's instantaneous. And it's so different from the average AI product where you type in something and then you're like, thinking. Thinking. It's like back in the days where we had a turbo button on computers, like CPUs had a turbo button. I never understood what those turbo buttons did, but I am seeing it now too, where this latency problem is leaking to the products where some search inputs have a turbo mode. So you have products where they expose the reality that there is two kinds of models under the hood. One that thinks fast, one that thinks slow. That also feels like something that we're seeing now as a stepping stone to something much simpler and much more robust.
Yes, longer term it might be different. Yeah.
And I think that's like a big thing through all this is like as a society we're still figuring out how to use AI applications, and so I view kind of like that turbo mode as you're kind of like helping the user just understand
the underlying system.
Exactly.
For sure. Exactly. I think the idea that I have to support this is when Google first came out, not everyone was like an expert in Googling, right?
No,
so
it's prompt engineering, actually. Searching on Google,
it's like old school prompt engineering.
Yeah.
We all figured out, if I use quotes, I get more out of it. If I use certain modifiers, even just like picking the right keywords.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think with the chat systems, with generative AI, we're kind of still like understanding how they think, so then we can better prompt them. Now the question will be, how approachable will that be to the whole world?
Yeah.
Like, will everybody really understand that there is an AI on their side, or will that be completely transparent? When we do recognize that we're interacting with an AI, will we adapt the way we work and the way we talk to it and interact with it? So far, the evidence that I have supports that we will change how we think and how we talk depending on how we interact with the systems. At Versel, we created this product called VZero.
Yeah.
It's for generative UI, so generative user interfaces. And the thing that we've noticed is that you do type English, and you press enter, and it generates the user interface of an application. That's basically the primary goal of this app. But the way that I talk to it is not exactly how I would talk to a designer or engineer.
Yes.
With a designer or engineer, it would be a lot more thorough.
Right.
It's almost like when I'm talking to this, I'm picking my tokens.
Yes.
Like, I know what are the things that are actually going to influence the result, and I leave other stuff out.
It's a very particular human that you're
Exactly,
talking to.
exactly. And there's other nuances, like I don't correct my typos anymore.
Yeah, of course,
So
'cause
I
that
used
doesn't
to
matter, yeah.
really worry about that, and
Same
now
with Google search.
yes,
Yeah.
and now it's just like, oh, I think it'll approach that vector space of where that token lives. I'll go with it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you think that's like a feature or a bug that you're talking to it in a different way than a human? Because I think right now it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
But as the models get better and better, will they approach the point where you can, like, you don't need to do this prompt engineering?
Yeah,
almost?
I wonder. My guess is that it heavily depends on each application. So if I'm using VZero or Midjourney, I'm in tool using mode. I'm getting a job done. I'm going to be quick, succinct. This is, again, why latency matters so much. And, or I'll give you another example. So when folks use CoPilot on their text editors,
Yes.
there's this little trick you can use where you can write a comment that
Yep.
you're not going to leave in the code.
Yep.
It's just like you're
Yeah.
providing it context, right? So you kind of you tune into how the AI Copilot works. It's almost like you understand them. Kind of like you get to know your colleagues in the better ways to give them feedback and how they work and their strengths and weaknesses. But I agree with you that a lot of the other systems and applications like support will not necessarily have this kind of specialized AI interaction model. I think they'll be much more natural. Same goes for when voice AI kicks in. A lot of folks will just be interacting with this thing like it's a human being.
Cool.
Sharon,
Thank
I'm
you.
curious for your take on the general, like, now that this
Yeah.
moment's here, you've been in it for 10 years, you said?
Close
like,
to.
Yeah. Like, what surprised you about like, we're here, it's here. What surprised you?
I think the most incredible thing was, as a researcher, it was very clear in 2020 when GPT-3 came out that there was a paradigm shift. There's only a few thousand of us, right? And we were like, this is crazy.
There's dozens of us.
Yeah, but no one really. Let's just say go-to-market was very different for us pre and post ChatGPT.
Totally.
Because when that happened, it was less about, sure, there's education now, but there's so much pull. So
Totally.
it went from a little bit of push, some people pulling and being curious, to immense pull at the C-level, everyone
Yeah.
asking me to go speak at their board meetings, for example, and trying to understand what is our AI strategy. And that's actually been, what is our AI strategy is something that people have been asking about for quite some time. And the landscape has evolved so fast, Harrison. I personally was not expecting an explosion of this measure. And of course, chatting with my friends at OpenAI, they also didn't know that when they released ChatGPT. So from that perspective, I think it's incredible. I think it's actually a huge piece of it is not only the technology, but the user experience, as we've been talking about. I think there's a huge component of this where if you can just send a text message, and before GPT-3 actually, you could prompt engineer to do similar things, but you would need to know how to prompt engineer, need to know how to where to place the colon. It was very sensitive to spaces, et cetera. But with ChatGPT, anyone can send a text message. We're so used to that, right? As a mode of UX. And so I think that's what really transformed how we can interact with it. And then I think that's expanded the audience of who can use this technology to not just a few researchers who know, how next token prediction works, to then developers hitting APIs, to my mom and dad who can send a text message. And They typically just try to trick the model, but it's like,
The quality, the exponential increase in quality is what boggles my mind. You mentioned GPT-3. I was blown away by GPT-3.
Yeah.
But then GPT-4. You know what I mean? Then GPT-4 Vision. So what I think is really compelling about having an AI strategy, because of course when you say, boards pulling me in to have an AI strategy, I do remember folks wanting to have a blockchain strategy and an internet strategy, and you have to ask yourself, like, are they going to follow through? Is this actually the thing that they need to pursue at this given time? And I would say with AI it is, because you're seeing this almost unpredictable improvements in capability, in performance, in quality.
Yes.
So you want to be riding that wave.
Right.
You want to be scrappy. You mentioned OpenAI not knowing what ChatGPT would become. It was a very scrappy, very iterative in public release, which is exciting to see because everybody's learning, everybody's iterating, and you have to get those AI products out there to get that flywheel going.
Right.
And that's exactly what we see, like a lot of the best teams doing is releasing these products early and then looking at how
fast,
people don't know how they'll use the product.
Exactly.
And so just getting because no one's built these types of products before, so just getting it out there, seeing what types of questions people will ask, what they'll want to do, and then refining that, because again you're starting from this massive model and you want to make it good for your task, and so you need to figure out almost like what is that task kind of, unless you really know it, but you can never really predict how users will use some of these things.
100%, just like ChatGPT. So as the landscape evolves so fast, do you have any suggestions for the audience for how to keep a competitive edge in this space? Either what you've done so far, maybe your competitive moat, how you've thought through that. I don't know.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about our strategy at Versel. So we at Versel provide infrastructure for people to build great products. So naturally, we wanted to build AI infrastructure. So because we tailor front-end engineers, this is primarily JavaScript and TypeScript developers, we created libraries and tools and examples that help these developers create AI products. And we actually placed a bet that there were going to be lots of AI products and not just one AI product, ChatGPT. Even with the release of GPTs and the app ecosystem that's going to create, our bet was the market will want to incorporate and have their own AI products. We're also seeing the validation from open source, the rise of open source models.
100%,
so everything points to this initial wave of AI to be a very developer-centric wave. Even though there are consumer products that are making waves, building and giving tools to developers has been awesome. We have a lot of customers in production building awesome AI applications. Runway, creating generative video. We power all their interfaces. And the other prong of this is, what is the AI product that is native and aligned with our mission and vision of the world? So we created this product called VZero to help folks automate this UI creation. And one of the things that we've done that I think can turn into a very interesting moat is not only do we understand the space really well, because we're creating an AI product that fits within that context, we also are focusing a lot on the quality and the flywheel of our developers actually putting the stuff that we create into production. So my advice to anyone that's creating a product in this space will be, pick your metric that allows you to track quality over time. AI systems can be very unpredictable. Regressions in quality are very frequent. So how do you think about the improvement and the rate of improvement of this system? So I mentioned one of my favorite AI products, which is CoPilot in VS Code. What they look at is, when you're typing in some code, they give you an AI suggestion. The question there is, are you accepting it or not? Are you actually creating value for the developer? Are they putting that AI generated code into their code base? For us, it's the same thing. Are we generating user interfaces that folks love, that are putting into production products? We look at metrics like copying and pasting the code that we generate, exporting it, even taking screenshots of the UI. And over time, that generates the moat of, you get the feedback, you improve the system, you see that metric tick up, you get more feedback, you improve the system. That's, to me, the way that companies can get your own feedback in place, your data, and increase quality over time.
That makes sense. How do you keep a competitive moat at Linkchain?
I think for us internally, I think the main thing's kind of like speed, if we're being honest. Like I think a lot of what we do is try to bring like a lot of the best tooling to people who can put it in their products. And I think like in a crazy fast moving time like this, I think like we have an incredible team that I think is able to move very fast. And so I think we're able to incorporate a lot of the recent kind of like advancements and things like that. For companies kind of like building more end user facing products, I'd agree with a lot of what you said on kind of like the gathering feedback, gathering that data set. I think that's a lot of what we're working with companies around Langsmith for collecting this data, sending that thumbs up, thumbs down are good. You can copies even better. Yeah, I think like there you can capture either like directly with thumbs up or thumbs down or indirectly through. Do they click on a link that
Correct.
you suggest? Do they copy it? Do they take a screenshot? Something like that. So I think getting that feedback, building up that data set, really important. The other thing that I'd say is I think a lot of the applications that Linkchain helps enable are what I would call like context-aware reasoning applications. So a lot of it is about bringing relevant context to the language model. I think if you don't bring unique and relevant context, then it's just kind of a wrapper around kind of like GPT, and there's not much kind of like defensibility there. So I think a lot of what we work with teams are around is like what data or like logic do they have that they can put in to ChatGPT? And sometimes that logic, by the way, is just like how they understand or think about the world,
Totally.
right?
That's our case. The UIs that we generate have a very specific set of constraints in quality and signals that we've learned over the past 20 years of front-end engineering. So we were able to
experts at that.
synchronize the context with what we know will be good. So we're almost like guiding this really powerful, crazy AI into like a more constrained direction.
Yeah, and VZero, fantastic product, by the way.
you.
Love it. But I think yeah, like that idea of allowing like experts to encode their knowledge and use that as a differentiator is important. And then also on the context side, like what data sets do you have? Like we work with a bunch of companies who want to enable kind of like better experiences, where better experiences really deeply means understanding what products they have available that they can suggest to people. And so hooking into those databases, and there's basic retrieval stuff, there's more advanced retrieval stuff. It very much depends on the use case. And so another thing that we believe in as well, and very much goes in line with what you're saying around this being kind of like a developer-centric thing, there's these different like cognitive architectures for building things. And I think when you look at ChatGPT, or the assistance API that it puts out, that's one particular cognitive architecture, which is very general and very broad, and probably only something that OpenAI can really do end to end. But for more specific ones, you're going to want a specific prompting strategy. You're going to want specific ways of bringing context in. You're going to want a specific cognitive architecture. And so that's kind of the tooling that we provide to other people to try to build up. I think cognitive architectures can be a defensible moat as well, if you kind of like scale them up and put enough thought into them.
You're also touching on this new architectures, this new ways of thinking about writing software.
Yep.
So for anyone that's still not shipping AI products to production, I think step number one is developer education. It's how do you get your engineers to understand how to interface with these systems, to understand the failure modes. Again, I think a lot about the beginnings of the cloud. One of the things that Amazon would always talk about is in the cloud and in any distributed systems, at any given point, systems can fail. The virtual machine stops responding. The availability zone just goes offline. Right. So you have to design around that. And that was a crucial moment where folks before used to think of this monolithic hardware and software systems as perfectly reliable. In the cloud, we have lots and lots of computers that are getting hammered all the time, and with high utilization comes higher failure rates, and there's smaller pieces of machines. So we had to learn how to design reliable systems by creating horizontally scalable architectures. Now we have to learn about creating reliable systems in the context of AIs, hallucinations, the ins and outs of latency, and the stitching of all the different models and chaining them together. So engineers need to learn all these new patterns, and the best way to learn is to ship. So that's why I always encourage folks. At Versel, we built a bunch of templates where you can get your own ChatGPT. You can add to your website your own assistant, kind of similar to the awesome product that AngelList highlighted today, where you can sort of navigate the complexity of the user interface through text and through chat type interaction. In those things, so you can sort of start prototyping and shipping incrementally, and you kind of train your engineers in these new systems by doing that.
100% agree with that. Yeah.
Really agree with that. We have some templates together, which I think is great. And I think the what I like about the templates is one challenge here is that yes, like you need to build up this mental model of how to work with these things, and then a new model comes out like 2 weeks later, and all of that just like kind of like doesn't completely disappear, but it changes, right? And so templates I think are great because it's easy to update. We've moved more and more towards providing templates for folks to get started because it's easier to update. You know, some of the base stuff stays the same, but the exact scaffolding that you put up is it can change very rapidly.
And open source, I think, also kind of throws a wrench into everything because what we're learning is, okay, there's these awesome APIs that under the hood have models, but the APIs are just really easy to use for developers and integrate into systems like Linkchain and Versel AI SDK. But what about when I iterate and try out a new thing, which might be an open source model, which I might want to fine tune myself. Maybe I want to deploy it on-prem or cloud-prem within the context of something like AWS Bedrock. So the landscape is also shifting very quickly because folks are asking themselves, is the route open source or is the route kind of the early wave that we're seeing that does have a head start with proprietary models?
100%, yes. And that's obviously where we're playing in to make it much faster for people to ship those open source models as easily as it is to hit those APIs like OpenAI. And I would say, looking to the future, today, of course, GPT-4 does amazing wonders for a huge range of different applications. And there are applications where it can't service exactly, and you might have that domain expertise, like you said, right, in your space knowledge or data. And from that perspective, it becomes so valuable to be able to incorporate that expertise into the model, and you might not be able to adapt it fully with just RAG or even advanced RAG is what we found. So the next stage is this open source, and quite frankly, if I were to look 5 years in the future, I can see LLMs are really the new IP. It's similar to data over the past decade. It's finally making your data useful, actually, which is exciting.
To your point, it seems like it's always been, but now we can actually make it useful as a product, and the data really does become the IP.
Yeah. Cool. So, I mean, moving from that, how do you view the AI landscape evolving over the next 5 years? Anything?
Yeah,
hard to predict, I know, but go for it.
I think maybe to set a little bit in how we think of the AI landscape right now. I think the AI landscape right now is so dynamic and so changing, and everyone's still trying to figure out like kind of where they fit in. I mean, even let's look at like vector databases, for example. Like I think it's easy to pick on. Yeah, it has, and there's so many of them, and then some of them are starting to add more traditional database features, and then traditional databases are starting to add vectors. So everyone's trying to figure out like what the landscape will look like. So I think
maybe next 5 minutes.
Yeah,
exactly. 10 minutes. There's a model coming out.
I know. What do you think of it? The last one.
Well, I just deployed it from my phone using VZero.
Okay.
So
not from your humane.
I'm online waiting for my.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the things that I'm excited about over the next time scale, I think, are the customization of these things, both through open source models, fine tuning it on data and getting this, or you can also fine tune like OpenAI models, but just fine tuning in general, I think a lot of people have found that to be really helpful. We did a project, Linkchain was used in a project for cal.com that had a calendar assistant. And they used a fine-tuned GPT 3.5 turbo model that was really good at function calling for their 10 specific functions that they needed to learn. And so I think things like that are really exciting. And then I also think customization in the form of like these cognitive architectures almost. And I'd tie that actually really hand in hand with like figuring out what the right UX for these applications are. Because I don't think it's going to be just chat. I think there'll be other UXs as well. I think we're starting to see more like long-running background jobs. If you look at some of the APIs that OpenAI put out, they're actually they're around this like idea of like message passing and polling. So you poll an API to see when it's done. And So I don't have any specific predictions, but I think those are the things that I'm excited about and looking forward to over the next
definitely.
timeline.
Well, we've been seeing applications with batched inference, like really heavy batches of I want over 10,000 calls today.
Really good for like a lot of document processing in an offline manner so that you can power things more quickly and just have that data ready.
Yeah.
So from my point of view, I'll start at super high level. I think every business will have to become necessarily an AI-infused business. Every product will become an AI-first product. I call this the distinction between like software 1.0 and software 2.0. There's an ossification effect that I predict will happen on the software 1.0 layer, where the languages, the data structures, the sort of old school, let's call it old school computer science concepts, of course, will continue to be incredibly important. But where's the differentiation for every engineer if you're getting out of school and getting your first job, or you're creating a new business, or you're deciding on your future product roadmap? The differentiation will accrue in the software 2.0 skill set. I think it'll happen naturally because why? Like that's where revenue growth is right now. When you look at earnings of the three major clouds, who's growing the fastest right now? Azure, predicated on the success of AI. If you look at where venture capital is going, if you look at even where consumer dollars are going, we have all these proof points of excellent applications like Midjourney or ChatGPT that are getting consumers excited. So as all the attention, revenue, and attention, no pun intended, and capital continues to accrue towards software 2.0, we'll have this new market emerge of companies that are going to be providing and supplying the AI infrastructure, and of course companies that are going to be buying. So at Versel, we're always asking ourselves, like, to the point of every week, how can we facilitate that adoption when you really have not been born into that world of AI? What are the tools and systems that we can provide for you so that you can kind of get over the hump? In terms of interfaces, it's our jam at Versel, front ends and user interfaces. So I've given it a lot of thought.
Yeah.
So one of the things that is really exciting to me is this idea of how can you help the user of your application navigate the entire complexity of your system without having to like sort of learn from scratch every single time. So if you look at the critics that kind of point out like system A or system B have a very bad user experience, they typically point out systems that have existed for 20, 30 years, right? You talk about like TurboTax or like some system that has just been around for a long time. And of course, it's really successful. So over time, what happens is they accrue a lot of complexity in their user interface. They add lots of features. They add lots of products. So I'm very excited in this idea of leveraging AI as your almost primary interface point. And it's not going to be just chat, but we do navigate the world through language. And it's for that reason that language models are the path to intelligence that has been the most successful so far for us. So if we can combine the unique strengths that these products bring in how they visualize data, something I liked about the AngelList product that I saw today is that when someone asks a question, it rendered a chart. It didn't just respond with text saying like, oh yeah, the stock price is up. It rendered an interactive visualization of the data that came from another system. So that intermix of language, the natural way that people think in terms of how they interact with the UI, with the unique strengths that companies bring to the table and their own existing investments in components, combining those into this new experiences is how I think folks will navigate and create their own paths into AI.
100%. Cool. Let's move on to Q&A from the audience. First question is, and I have a question to tack onto this, but first, like, in addition to your exciting companies, what other startups are impressing you the most? And maybe tacking on that a little bit of, do you use any other AI products in your day-to-day? And what's fun to use? So, you know.
I can start. I just installed this product called Raycast AI. It basically enables the AI to be surfaced on the operating system layer, which if I were to make a prediction, will also say, like, I think our operating systems themselves, we've seen it with Humane AI Pin, the AI being infused into the operating system, and you don't even have to go to the web browser at that point, right? Like you're sort of integrating the AI directly into whatever it is that you were doing. I think that's going to be a big part of the future. And I happen to really love that product.
Which OS exactly?
So this is called Raycast. It's basically the application launcher where, like, in my case, I press Command Spacebar and it comes up. So think about using AI without leaving the thing that you were doing.
Yeah.
Like I was on Slack, and of course everyone will integrate AI into their products. Like Slack will have Slack AI and so on and so forth. But there is almost like another dimension to the problem where, like, you want to bring AI into everything you're doing.
Right.
So that happens to be like this like productivity hack. I've also been really impressed to your question about who's executing well. I think OpenAI, of course, they brought all these innovative technologies, but
I want to say that was a cop-out answer.
Yeah, of course. But I want to point out one thing I think it's really interesting is, like, it's just very rapid iteration. And this, for us, like, it feels super validating because the thing that we obsess with at Versel is giving you tools so that you can try out ideas very, very quickly. Right. Deploy, run an experiment. And to me, it's very clear that if you're interested in AI or you are in AI, that has to be your default operating mode. So kudos to them on accomplishing that in a very public way.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. I think in terms of, like, any single company that's been the most impressive, I think it's been OpenAI by far. And they're also, like, I use ChatGPT. That's probably the biggest AI product that I use.
Heard about it.
Other ones that we use at Linkchain, much smaller obviously, but we have a company called Dosu that has a bot on our GitHub that responds to people's questions. It's actually really good, and I think people have like thanked the bots lots of times and started tagging it proactively as well. And I think the thing that I like about that as well is going to the point around UX. It's not a chatbot, so it can take its sweet time in the background to figure out how to best to answer. And, like, if it responds in 10 minutes, that's totally fine. Like, we have way too many issues. I can't respond to all of them in 10 minutes, right? So that I think is, like, a really good example of a different type of UX.
And to your point about async, right? There's all this intelligence that can be just added to existing workflows that are already asynchronous.
100%. And then another one that I like is New Computer. So they're kind of like reimagining kind of like a personal assistant, and I think the two founders there are really strong and complement each other. And you may know Sam.
Yeah, I know Sam.
You might have, so Sam I think is great on kind of like the engineering and ML side, and then the other co-founder has an incredibly strong background in design. And so I think in terms of companies that are pushing the boundary on, like, what new types of UI and UX might look like for a lot of these applications, they're definitely up there for me.
And what kind of UI and UX? What is the new UI UX?
So I think they're doing I think like an iPhone app, which is, I think the design co-founder was one of the authors builders of Mercury OS, and so there's a lot of that type of style that's imbued into there.
Very cool.
Another one that comes to mind is Leonardo AI. They help folks create game assets.
Yeah.
I like those ideas that say, okay, generative images are here, or new kinds of creating illustrations and things like that. Who needs illustrations? Oh, it turns out video game developers need them. So, okay, let's bring the technology and then also create all the necessary workflows to actually make it really good. Yeah. So it's that last 5%. This is, I think, what's fundamentally creating all the big opportunities in AI today. Is the foundation model is there. You could almost argue it's easy. But to actually make it work for that specific vertical, there's all these little challenges that you have to figure out. Yeah. And then you end up having to create a great product of the old school software 1.0 days, right? Like, you have to create UIs, you have to create the supporting community in many cases. I'm impressed with all the products that are launching, again, in a very scrappy way. Right. You launch a Discord, and that kind of becomes your launching pad for the community, of course, but then you have to actually build the rest of the owl. You have to draw the rest of the owl. You have to build the rest of the product.
And use CoPilot for that.
And of course, VZero. And that's, I think, how you bridge the gap. How do you become a complete full stack business that has a differentiation, has a moat, that has an engaged user community, and of course, you own that front end and that interface to the user that makes you, retain that user and build better over time.
That's why I'm interested to see what happens with, like, GPTs and these things, because it's so easy to create them, right? You give it a prompt, you maybe give it some tools, But then how does that evolve over time? Is that UX
Correct.
of a chat like the best for your application? I think that's,
Yeah.
I think obviously it's 4 days old, so who knows? But I think that's going to be really interesting to see
Yeah.
how that plays out.
Yeah, it's a fun experiment. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
for sure.
think
Yeah.
OpenAI likes to experiment with these things, and
Yeah.
I think that's the right strategy. Yeah.
Yeah.
My favorite product is probably Midjourney. I just love the Discord kind of interaction. That's so easy, and it's just mind blowing that.
The quality.
Yeah, you can do that, and you can just press buttons, and it's done.
In that vein as well, one of my other favorite ones is Suno. So they have
Yeah.
very similar kind of like model to Midjourney, their Discord, but their text to speech, in particular like text to music.
It's wild.
Yeah.
It's absolutely wild.
Yeah. So yeah, you type in your prompt, gets
All modalities, here we go.
Yeah.
and connecting that back to something that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Like it's so easy to get that feedback of like whether people like it in
Yeah.
Discord,
So
right?
easy.
Like
And
how
that's
to prompt it.
How to prompt it. And you expose other people to what good prompts are. Like
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
lot
It's a
of
flywheel.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
my favorite is like the up sample. That's a signal that you actually really like it. Well, with that, thank you very much. We're out of time. Thank you, Harrison and Guillermo, and AngelList for having us here, and everyone here for listening. Special shout out to Reed, AngelList employee, who's awesome. And to wrap things up, I will pass it over to Avla Kohli, AngelList CEO, for closing thoughts in just a few minutes. Stay tuned.